Before the first step into this fog, promise me you'll watch the video to the very end. Something wakes in the last minute, and you need to hear it breathe. Chapter 1. The Hour That Forgot My Name. I was supposed to be cataloging scrap steel behind an abandoned rail depot when the weather miscounted the seconds and found me. You don't think of wind as a clock, not until you hear it tick. The air sharpened to the edge of a knife, the clouds rolled into a bruise, and the old crane, locked since before I was born, squealed like it had never been oiled. I should have run. I didn't. Men who work alone get used to the voice of wrong weather and ignore it. The hook swung and kissed the ground. Sparks flew where there were no wires. I took one step back, then I wasn't there anymore. I landed in dust so fine it slid into my mouth like secrets. The sky had two suns, neither warm, and a ruined keep hunched on a ridge as if it had dragged itself there. The wind carried a smell like a church basement after a flood. People appeared from a furrowed field, gaunt men and women with ash on their faces, and I was a trespasser in their hunger. They bound my hands with a twist of braided nettle and dragged me to the keep. There were no spokes on their wagon. It ran on bones. Every time I tried to speak, someone struck the back of my head as if words were a debt I could not pay. At the gate, an old man in a robe stained the color of old parchment looked me over, and his eyes told me he was counting teeth, not mine but someone's. "Outwalker," he said as if spitting. "Thief of hours." I opened my mouth to argue. They opened a grate in the yard. The smell that came out was not of earth, but of an age too long buried and suddenly reissued. They shoved me toward the hole. I told myself there would be a ladder, a shelf, some way to catch myself. There wasn't. I fell into a lightless cistern slick with fat and old thoughts. I hit Muck's shoulder first. Something slid past my neck and paused to taste. A lantern dropped from above, landed near me, breaking but not dying. It wheezed, a blue flame flinching. In the stone sweat glare I saw letters carved into the curved wall, each character scooped like a spoonful of shadow. A whisper rose from the water. It stopped pretending to be water at all. Chapter 2. The Pit and the Lantern. The thing in the pit was not shaped like anything the living would claim. It was the memory of a beast, the ache of one. It pressed itself into my ribs with 1,000 blunt teeth, and when I drove my elbow down, I felt those teeth print themselves into my skin like a signature. The lantern's blue flame sputtered when it touched the surface. Whatever the fluid was, it didn't like being seen. I grabbed the broken lantern by its wire throat, swung, and struck the beast's knot face, again and again, until the wire snapped and the flame licked my hand. The beast recoiled, and in recoiling, it spoke without a mouth, not words, but the sense of a bargain. The pit did not want me. It only wanted the part of me that remembered being brave. A rope dropped like a slow, doubtful snake. I caught it. Hands hauled me up, too many to count, and I was back in the wet light of day. The old man stood by the grate, and beside him a woman in a coat of stitched feathers and scales, her hair tied back with a length of copper wire. The old man's eyes were the color of wood smoke. The woman's were night, not sky, but the hour itself. "You should have died," the old man said, not unkindly. "Everything does." "Name?" the woman asked me. I gave it. It sounded like a stranger's. She nodded, as if measuring where it would fit between other names kept in jars. "I am Marsa," she said. "He is Hob. We thought the Ashen host would call someone like you. We hoped it wouldn't." The crowd had no joy to offer. They watched me like I was a match held too close to their house. "Why throw me in the pit?" I asked. Hob tapped the grate with his stick. "The pit decides who lies and who is lied about." He led me into the keep's cracked heart. On a table lay a slab of black glass, not glass, but obsidian with grain in it, pages carved thin as frost. The edges were sharp enough to shave the breath off a man. Scratched across the slab were lines that looked like grain in wood but were words, countless, restless. "This is the lament," Hob said. "It holds what we forget and what we cannot let go. The host wants it, to name us properly. We wanted to keep the host asleep. There is a copy somewhere past the moor, in the ruins of a hungry house. If the host touches any page and speaks, more of them wake. If an outwalker touches it and speaks, sometimes they go back where they came from. We have no outwalkers except you. Marsa poured something into my cut hand. The pain took root and flowered. 3 words, she said. When you take the lament, you must say them without pause, or the lament will answer itself. Ansel. Dorth. Care. I repeated them. My mouth made ritual of it. The room shivered. Hob flinched. Do not use them here, he said thinly. Do not even think of them here. The air has ears. I left the keep carrying a coil of rope, a blade made from a mill saw, and a lantern that would only go out if I begged it. The moor unrolled like a carpet of dead tongues. Somewhere in the distance, something knocked on a door no house owned. I told myself the words I had been given. I told them to the empty world, like a letter written to a friend I had not met. Chapter 3. The Threefold Word. The house waited with its back broken, its spine in the air. Trees had leaned close to listen to it die and stayed there, afraid to move. I stepped through a doorway that had no door and smelled dust that used to be prayers. There was a mirror in the inner room, a sheet of tarnish elected to royalty by neglect. When I looked, the glass did not show me. It showed a room where the walls were closer and the light redder. I raised my hand. My reflection raised both. It wanted to meet me twice as badly as I wanted to see it. The lament copy lay on a lectern carved from ribs, or would that missed ribs? Obsidian, thin as the idea of ice. I reached. The mirror clicked, a dry insect sound. The hair on my arms reached to Ansel, I said, clean as a fresh nail. The lament hummed, a note only the teeth can hear. Dorith, I said, and the floor found this very interesting. I choked. A slip of dust, a cough that had waited just there all day, found my throat. I forced air and got a travesty. A swallow, a smear, not the word, a cheap knockoff of syllables. The lament answered me. The room forgot it had a roof. The moor outside lifted like the skirt of a drowning woman. Bones sifted upward, clicks piled on clicks, an abacus of the dead suddenly consulted. I grabbed the lament and backed toward the door. The mirror rippled and spoke with my mouth. You, it said, and the word hated me. My reflection stepped out with the modesty of an executioner. Where my left hand was scarred, his was whole, and in his whole hand he held a blade that behaved like a live thing. He smiled like my teacher on the day I lied and got away with it. You said it wrong, he said softly. So I get to say it right. Outside, the soil coughed up a helmet. Then a spine. Then an army of harvest tools that had waited in men who no longer needed them. They rose and found the wind to lean on. Helmets rattled laughter. I ran. My shadow ran the other way for a step before remembering. My double did not run. He followed as if walking downhill. There is a speed faster than you can move. It is the speed of someone who is you without the weights you place on yourself. In the moor, the first of the host pulled itself into a shape a child could draw and learned it could hold a sword. I cut it down. It fell apart into apologies and then found itself again. There are battles you win without winning. I ran until the keep showed ragged teeth against the sky, the lament thrumming under my arm, my own breath trying to leave me before I used it up. Chapter 4. The Hill of Iron. The field outside the keep had been seeded with broken plows and men who would never need them again. We dragged the planks inward, bolted doors with rail spikes, nailed shutters until they were more nail than wood. Marsa took the lament from me with both hands but did not open it. Her eyes said she wanted to. Her hands did not ask permission of her eyes. The host, Hob asked, although the sound beneath his question said he could hear them already. Rising, I said, led by someone I should have killed when I was a boy and didn't. There were smiths here, not the kind that make chairs. I knew machines in my muscles, the lean of a beam, the worth of a lever's pity. We took cart axles and made hurling arms, tied them with sinew soaked in brine and stubbornness. We brewed pitch with powdered quicklime that burned like resentment and bit like judgment. Children crushed glass and slipped it into little clay jars. Old women wound twine around nails until the nails wore the twine instead. My left wrist had taken the worst of the pit's bite. A blacksmith named Bren, who had a way of speaking to iron like a lover who won't be reasonable, built me a brace out of collarbones and tempered spring. Into it he anchored a crank and an auger bit we found in a chest of tools. When I turned the crank, the auger leaped like a dog at a throat. I strapped it down and felt whole where I had been split. Night came faster than it should. The two suns slid behind trees that shouldn't have been there. Torches sullied the air. The host gathered just out of bowshot, polite in its hatred. Skulls grinned as if they had misheard the joke and liked their version better. Marsa stood by the lament on a pedestal of stacked grindstones. Hob inked a circle around her with soot, salt, and a dust that had never had a name. "If they touch it, they'll know us by our true names," he said. "If you touch it at the right time, you might go home. Or you might take their king with you. Both ends are sharp." "Their king is me with fewer regrets," I said. He said the word correctly. "Then he can be hurt by you saying something else correctly," Hob said. His teeth were small and very white, like the keys of a good instrument. From the wall I watched. The host arranged itself the way water arranges in a stream that believes it has reason. The double who wore my face raised his sword and spoke. The knight leaned to listen. "Ansel," he said clearly. The lament turned its head as if a trapdoor had opened in its dream. "Dorith," he said, and the stones under my boots found a second life and thought about leaving. He waited for the third word for a breath too long. He wanted me to hear it. He wanted me to learn. He wanted me to live in that loss. "Care," he said perfectly. Something inside the keep unlatched. Down in the silt below the pit, a door opened inward. Chapter 5. Night of Grinding Teeth. The first wave ran like a rumor. We loosed clay jars that sang and broke and became light. Pitch crawled up ribcages and found collarbones convenient. Bone bows shot bone arrows, and when they hit, they did not break, they adopted. The wall shook like a drum hit from the wrong side. I learned my brace as if it had always been my hand. I wrenched the crank and the auger chewed through a skull, then grabbed a second and tugged them both like weeds that refused to admit soil. The host did not bleed, but it minded heat. Our lime jars burst into white shrieks. The air powdered itself with anger. The double moved through it all like a man who has never fallen downstairs. He stepped over flame. He gave orders in my voice, but mine never sounded that patient. He climbed the siege ladder laid against our wall and met me where the stones knew our weight. "You could have gone home," he said conversationally, parrying a hook and raking the air near my throat so the air remembered it. "You could have let someone else be brave. You could shut up," I said and struck. He smiled when he could have smiled, or he could have died. He chose the smile because it would make the dying take longer. Marsa cried out. Two of the host, more careful than the rest, had slipped through a crack in our line and reached the lament's pedestal. Their hands smoked where they touched the circle Hob had drawn, but they did not complain. Hob dragged a brush of salt to fix the broken arc. A skull bit his hand and took 2 fingers as price. He kept painting with what was left. I did what I have always done when I am without enough answers. I lied with my body. I pretended to miss. The double laughed. Laughter bent his knees. A hinge shows itself only when a door moves. I kicked low and felt a knee that should have been mine break in a way that would have embarrassed me in front of a child. He hissed and stopped looking like a god. "Your word is better than mine," I told him, and I turned quick and grabbed a jar meant for the next volley. It was not lime. It had a wick. "Say it," he demanded, still smiling but less. "Say it or say goodbye." I lit the wick and pushed it against the lament's edge. The host screamed, not for pain, but for etiquette. "You do not burn a library, not even if it has teeth." Fire walked the edges of the obsidian pages, and where it touched the etchings they lifted free like moths and fled up into the rafters where they shivered. The double forgot me just for a breath. He reached for the lament and did not find it where he wanted it to be. I drove the auger into his shoulder and turned the crank until the bone found a new opinion. He fell backward, not as a hero, but as a man surprised. The host felt it and took 1 step back together, a tide in a square bucket. Marsa leaped from the pedestal and threw the lament toward me. It slid across stone as if stone remembered being sea. I tore a strip from my shirt, wrapped it around my bleeding wrist, and gripped the lament with both hands. The words to say were not the 3 words. The lament wrote their shape in the meat behind my eyes. A different triad, a return path. It tasted like copper. Ulen. Maveth. Saran. I said, and the syllables cost me places I used to keep safe. The host looked up at a sky that had not been there a heartbeat before. The stars had moved and were spelling my name wrong. The double swung his blade. He looked small for the first time since I had met him. "Come with me," he said, and I knew what he meant. He meant he would follow, even if following made him less of himself, even if it took him farther from the word he envied. "No," I said, because one thing I have never done well is share. Chapter 6. The Price of Return. Hob told me how to drink the draft. 7 drops, he said. No more. No less. In the hollow under your tongue. Read what the lament shows you. Sleep in the circle. Wake where you forgot to be. I stood in soot. The keep had burned in places that were never wood. Marsa pressed her forehead to mine for the length of one breath. "If you come back," she said, "bring rain." I tipped the vial. Drops counted themselves, but my hands can lie to me, and my mouth can be proud. A drop skipped like a child. I caught it, or I thought I did. I lay in the circle and spoke what the lament wrote upon my tongue. Letters marched past, some holding spears, some holding lanterns. I fell asleep between marching feet. I woke to the rail depot. The crane hung its hook as if ashamed. The wind did not tick. The clock in my chest resumed. I stood and laughed and then stopped because someone else laughed with me, from a place where my mouth was not. It was near sundown. The sky was normal and had nothing to apologize for. The puddles in the yard held still, not mirrors, but their cousins. In one, my face moved a fraction before mine did. It had learned patience. I walked to the office to call someone I would have trouble explaining anything to. Inside, the lights hummed the way lights do in rooms that are waiting for bad news. A safety poster drooped on the wall. Next to it, stuck under a thumbtack, was something black and thin and wrong. An edge from the lament. A page. I didn't put it there. I turned. The man in the doorway was me once broken, now a question. He smiled. He knew exactly how much I'd taken and how much I'd left. "You spoke it right enough to get home," he said. "You spoke it wrong enough to bring a friend." Behind him, not outside, not inside either, the more unrolled itself like a tongue. The depot's shadow had too many bones in it. There were boots walking without legs to fill them. The air smelled of church basements again. I picked up a pry bar. It was not auger steel. It would do. Sometimes survival is about insulting the grand design with a tool you can afford. "Round 2? I asked. He shook his head, amused. "Round always." We went to work in the doorway, where the world was thin. The first of the hosts stepped across the threshold and found gravity did not love it here. I broke it the way you break a habit, unwillingly but completely. The lights shuddered. Somewhere a streetcar bell rang where there was no streetcar. I had the immense, stupid thought that this could be all right. That I could be the kind of man who brings war home and still pays rent on time. That I could learn to say all the words right, out loud, in the right order, until the world stopped bleeding. He moved. I moved faster. The pry bar cracked his sword and sent it clattering somewhere it didn't want to go. He caught my wrist, the brace long since gone, and we stood there, a hinge trying to be 2 doors. 7 drops. He whispered. "You always want 8. "Practice makes a person," I said. He leaned closer until his breath wrote on my cheek. "Stay awake," he said. "Count better." The second wave's shadows filled the hallway. The edge of the lament on the wall vibrated like a coin on a table. In the reflection of a puddle, the keep's torches burned again as if they had never learned different. I felt very large and very small and very wrong and very ready. If you are still listening, then you'll hear the part nobody believes. The way teeth can grind and sing at the same time, the way your own breath can sound like a new friend. And you'll understand why a man like me would tell you to stay until the end, because the end is a door, and it is not a door, and the thing knocking on it knows your name now, just as well as it knows mine. If this tale tightened your throat, subscribe to the channel, activate notifications, give the video a like, leave a comment with your favorite moment, and share it with someone who sleeps too easily.